What is up, guys? The regular season is officially over. We are into Wild Card Weekend. Welcome on into Pickswise Playbook, Wild Card Weekend edition, of course. Lauren Jabara, Jared Smith, Tank Williams. It's all presented by Superbook Sports. Tank, how you feeling? Postseason, baby. We have made it.
I mean, this is the best time of the year for me, actually. I mean, we just got through with the national championship was pretty disappointing, but I'm sure that these
Woo!
NFL wildcard games won't disappoint. So yeah, let's hurry up and get to the weekend.
Negative disappointment from us. Jared, how you feeling after that national championship game? Now we finish out with NFL. We have a few weeks of postseason and then the Super Bowl.
Yeah, feeling good. And I think when we get to this stage, the lines tighten up a little harder to find value, but that's what we're here for, right? That's what we do.
Mhm.
So without further ado, Ms. Lauren Ann Jabara, the proceedings continue.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we get into some of the games, there are 6 games going on this week. We're going to deep dive into all 6 of them. Let's talk about some NFL season betting stats. The unders at this point through 18 weeks, 150 and 118, 56% the unders are hitting this season. The best ATS teams against the spread teams in the playoffs. Bengals 13-3, Giants 13-4, Chargers 11-5-1, 49ers 11-6. Now the Bucks, obviously all season long, 4-12-1 against the spread. The Chiefs, 6-10-1. Before the picks, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I'm going to run through them, and then we're going to deep dive into some of these games. Are there too many points in the Dolphins-Bills game, in the Seahawks-49ers game? We'll see. Can the Bucks upset the Cowboys at home? We'll also see, because I know Jared feels strongly about this one. Will the Giants get revenge on the Vikings? Are they fraudulent? Who knows? Now with that, can I get a drum roll, my friends? Thank you. Let's
Oh
get
man,
into
you
the
got
wild
them
card
pipes
round.
going, Tank.
See,
That was
I feel like
impressive.
people are ready to run through a wall. Thank you. People are ready to
Yeah,
run through a wall at this point.
it's like that Kirby
Let's get to the
Smart
first game.
pregame speech from the other night. I don't know if you guys heard that, but
Seriously. I mean, there was a
that was like the
lot of
coach
swear words
from
in there.
Varsity Blues.
Yeah, there was a
I
lot
need
of
to go
swear
back and
words.
look at it.
It
Oh,
was
Tank,
I'll
it
Just,
was
send it to
just
you,
intense.
Tank.
yeah,
It was
just the sideline
unbelievable.
interview where when she was asking him the question, he just said aggressive, and I was like, oh really? Like,
Yeah,
oh my
I
goodness,
Yeah,
know.
what do
he's
you know
ready
about
to
the
go.
Zeno
It,
scoreboard?
that was what the pregame speech was. Tank, I can't even repeat it. There were so many profane. I mean, let's just leave it at this. If he
I
came and
like
gave
it.
our pregame speech before we did this show, be the best show ever.
Yeah, you'll
Man, I
be
should
ready
have
to
watched
run
it
through a
before the
wall. I
show then.
honestly recommend
Okay.
I recommend watching it before next week's Pickswise Playbook, just so you feel like ready and pumped up to go. That's all I
Okay.
gotta say. But without further ado, wild card round, my friends. Let's start it out with the Seahawks taking
Get
on the
wild.
49ers. The Niners laying 9.5 points. That total right now is set at 42.5. I know the regular season's in the past. It's time for the NFL playoffs. 2 NFC West rivals that already played twice this year. The Niners swept the series. The Seahawks made it in week 18 with a win and a Packers loss. They are the underdogs. They want to prove everyone wrong. San Fran, the number 2 seed in the NFC at this point, they want to win the whole thing. They're currently on a 10-game winning streak. This one's going to be interesting because this season, Tank, obviously the Seahawks, Geno Smith defied all odds. He set the franchise record for passing yards in a Seahawks single season, which is wild to think. And for the Niners, Brock Purdy came in. He's been solid for San Francisco. He's kind of proved people wrong too. He's thrown 13 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Is 9.5 too many points to lay with a rookie quarterback that's only played for 5 weeks against the Seahawks team and a quarterback that's really been rolling this season? Who do you see coming out on top of this one?
See, this is an interesting game when I look at it from
Mm-hmm.
a psychological perspective because the Seattle Seahawks don't have anything to lose. I mean, if we spin it all the way back to the beginning of the year, we didn't expect the Seahawks to be at this point. We thought they'll be picking at the start of the draft, and so for them to make it to the playoffs and then have an opportunity to face a division rival who they've already faced 2 times already, who they actually played pretty close in the last matchup at home. I think they go into this game with some confidence because even though the 49ers ran for over 200 yards against them up in Seattle, Purdy played a clean game. George Kittle went off. Yet and still, like the final score was 21-13, and for the Seahawks, they feel like they're still in this game. And I think one thing you can point to is that Tyler Lockett, they thought that they may have lost him for the season. He actually came back and played the past couple of weeks, showing that that finger's not bothering him too much. And the
Mhm.
one way that you can have some success against that San Francisco 49ers defense is through the air. And the Seattle Seahawks have Tyler Lockett, who's a deep threat. They have DK Metcalf. I think if Geno can protect the ball, they don't have any turnovers, no interceptions, no fumbles. They can put some stress on that San Francisco 49ers defense, especially the secondary. They can make a game out of it. So when you think at it from that perspective, is plus 9.5 too much for Seattle? It could potentially be, especially when you think about it from this perspective. I'm anxious to hear Jared on this. Will Kyle Shanahan go in with the approach to try to protect Brock Purdy and just kind of keep it tight to the vest? Because if he doesn't open up that offense too much, that could also make it to where it stays a little closer than what people would expect.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. Do they do that? Do they just protect Brock Purdy and use all the other pieces around him and make him just play safe? What's the game plan here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can tell you this. Purdy's numbers right now are better than Jimmy G's in terms of the analytics. And it's not a wide margin, but slightly better. And Purdy's played slightly fewer games. So there could be some volatility there if you extend that sample out to Jimmy played about 10, 11 weeks. And Brock's only played 6. So we'll see. Obviously the most important snaps to come. And I'll echo Tank's point that the one weak link of the Niners defense, like when I went into the Niners defense, I didn't find a whole lot of weak links. But the secondary, especially lately, they're a bottom 10 passing efficiency team defensively over the last 3 weeks. They allowed 34 points to Jarrett Stidham and the Raiders, 20 points to, Wentz and Heineke of the Commanders. So they were gashed a little bit there. But once we saw this line touch 10, and we've seen it kind of bounce around the 10 mark over the last few days, that's kind of the top of it, and then it got bought back down. So it seems like there's not a really strong appetite for San Francisco at that double-digit mark. And that makes sense because they were an 8.5-point favorite at home back in week 2. They won that game by 10. And that was a really good buy low spot for the Niners because it was the week after they lost to the Bears in week 1. The Bears are picking first. How about that? The Bears beat the Niners week 1 and then get the number 1 overall pick. I never would have guessed that. And then Seattle, of course, week 1, they upset the Broncos. So even at the buy low point for San Francisco, it was 8.5 at home in week 2. Now it's 9.5. So you could see some value there for Seattle. I will give you a brief history lesson because you're going to hear this a lot this week. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in the same season. Yes, a little bit. Last year, Rams lost to the Niners twice, and then they beat them in the NFC Championship game. So there you go. Tough to beat a team twice or 3 times in the same season. 2020, the Saints beat the Bucs twice during the regular season and then lost to the Bucs in the divisional round. Tampa Bay went on to win the Super Bowl that year. The Rams went on to win the Super Bowl last year. So it's kind of like that final boss of the video game. You lose to a team twice in your division, then you play them for a 3rd time in the playoffs. You win that game. You're able to go to the Super Bowl. Can Seattle repeat that feat? I don't know. There's also some instances of teams losing 3 times in the same year. 2017 Saints beat the Panthers 3 times. 2009 Cowboys beat the Eagles 3 times. 2008 Steelers beat the Ravens 3 times, went on to win the Super Bowl. So there is precedent for a team in the division winning 3 times in the same year. There's also some recent history of it not happening. But I'll kick it back to you for this one, Tank. I think if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I trust Brock Purdy. And I say, listen, Brock, you've taken me this far. We've got all the weapons in the world. Seattle's defense isn't playing well. Go win us this game. Because I think if San Francisco plays the Kyle Shanahan not to lose strategy like they did in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, that might be a recipe for an upset here.
Here's the thing. You guys both said that the way that the Seahawks can take advantage of the 49ers is through their secondary. But I look at their defense right now. Overall, they're holding opponents to 16.3 points per game this season, which is the best DVOA total in the NFL right now. They're first in the NFL. And they held the Seahawks to a total of 20 points over their 2 games this season. I also look at the amount of takeaways they have on the year, 30 of them, second in the NFL. I know their secondary might be the weakest link of their defense, but at the same time, they've still found a way to hold the Seahawks to a total of 20 points over 2 games. And they found a recipe of success against them, right, Tank?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think all those stats are true. I think the one thing that just stands out is that performance against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that's what's,
Yeah.
is stuck in my head. And that's a narrative that we can see play out. All right, so Gino had a phenomenal season this year, right? So do you think that Gino
Yeah.
can replicate what we saw from Jarrett Stidham for a game? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you think that could
Especially with
possibly happen,
DK
right?
Metcalf and Tyler
And
Lockett. They've got the
exactly, because
weapons.
they aren't Devontae Adams, but DK is a dog, right? And we love Tyler
Yeah.
Lockett. Like both of
Hmm.
those are two wide receiver ones in the NFL. So if they get their stuff together and they're able to expose that 49ers defense the same way that a number of teams have been able to do this year, we could see a path to Seattle having success through the air. And so if they can have some success in the passing game, most importantly, protect the ball, and if the defense steps up, I think they may be willing to give up some yardage in the ground game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle flips the script and say like, hey, we're going to make sure we take away Christian McCaffrey and Debo Samuel in the run game. We know you want to play conservative with Brock Purdy. We're going to take that away and force him to go downfield and beat us with Brandon Ayuk or gash us with George Kittle and say we're going to live by that. And if they're able to come up with some plays, because actually when you look at it, like Brock Purdy really hasn't had like those damn it Jimmy moments where he has like a bad turnover. But there have been a couple, like if you think about the Tampa Bay game, he had an interception that was overturned by a penalty, and he had one other interception, a turnover that was overturned by a penalty, something like that. So he's had those rookie mistakes here and there. Will he be able to not have those in the most important game of the year, which is their first playoff game? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Final thoughts from you, Jared. Would you lay the 9.5 with the Niners, or would you take them with the
No,
Seahawks?
I would try to get 10. It might pop up at some point again this weekend. And I'll give you the Kittle angle. 4 catches, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns in the last matchup. They've struggled against tight ends this year. Like Seattle played really well against the Chiefs, held the Chiefs to 297 total yards, but 113 of those yards were to Travis Kelce. So tight ends have been kind of a bugaboo for this Seattle defense. So if you want a Niners angle, I could absolutely see George Kittle having a big game. And on the Niners offensive side, listen, they've had the most turnover luck of any team in the NFL this year. I just looked at that data before I came on, and I was surprised to see how far in the upper right quadrant San Francisco was on that map. We know turnovers can be very volatile. And maybe if they're on the wrong side of a bad turnover in this game, like we mentioned with Brock Purdy, maybe that's the recipe for this game being close. Listen, what has the NFL proven to us this year? Who's the team that we don't think has any chance this week to win? I guess it would be Miami, but they don't have their starting quarterback. They're down to their third string. So that's a different story. Seattle has their starting quarterback. They're getting more points than they were in any other of the prior matchups against the Niners this year. And San Francisco is starting a quarterback that's making his first career playoff start. So there's some ingredients here for Seattle to keep this game close for sure.
Yeah, this one's going to be an interesting one. That kicks off Wild Card Weekend. Next up, we have the Chargers taking on the Jags. That's the 8:15 Eastern Time Saturday night game. This opened up, well, it was for a while, the Chargers laying 1.5, and then it was a pick-em. And now the Chargers are laying 2.5 points. That total is set at 47.5. And I know the Jags were a team that got in the last moment with a win, defeating the Titans. They're the 4th seed in the AFC. They want to take advantage of home field. They're on a 5-game win streak right now. Now the Chargers, they're the 5 seed in the AFC, and they're hoping to, as Tank would say, not Charger. They've won 4 of their last 5 games to get to this point, and they did what they needed to do to end their postseason drought of not being in the postseason since 2019. You look at Justin Herbert, he ranked 2nd in passing yards, and Austin Eckler ranks 8th in total yards. Their offense might be able to pick apart the Jags defense, but the Jags at the beginning of December, which is still crazy to me, guys, when you think about it, they were 4-8 at the beginning of December. The postseason wasn't even like in reach for them. They turned it around thanks to Trevor Lawrence and their defense that held its last 5 opponents to an average of 15.6 points. This game, I think, is going to be Justin Herbert and that offense that they have going up against the Jags defense and who holds staunch. Staunch? Is that a word? Stout? Staunch? Is staunch a word?
Staunch is like kind of, but but you didn't use it properly. But that's okay. The second time you got it right.
Jacksonville
strong. How about we use that? Tank,
he's a staunch
in this spot? Because I'm a staunch supporter. Who holds
You're a
strong, I'll
staunch
say,
supporter of
in
Lauren.
this
I'm a staunch
matchup.
supporter
It's
of
a
Lauren
tough game
Deborah.
to call. Yeah, thank you. It's a tough game to call.
You're
This
welcome.
line's been vacillating, but who has the edge, Tank, for you in this position?
This game is close. I really can't tell you who has an edge. I feel that
Yeah.
Brandon Staley gave up a little bit of an edge by leaving his starters in too long, and now you may be missing Mike Williams. I believe that's a big
Mm.
piece of that offensive puzzle for the Los Angeles Chargers, and I still don't understand why that actually happened, especially given the news that he already
Hmm.
had before that game kicked off. But let's go ahead and get into this matchup where, man, Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, man, like that team is good. Let's just kind of go through like the highlights of the offense. We need to just repeat it. Travis Etienne has been a beast, a monster. Los Angeles Chargers defense is traditionally bad against the run, even though they've kind of shored that up over the past few weeks. So that's a matchup that we're going to be looking out for. Trevor has all kind of weapons to throw the ball to. Whether you're talking about Evan Ingram,
Mm.
Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones hasn't done too much lately, but he's always lingering there, so he's a threat as well. So I feel good about the weapons and Trevor being able to kind of throw the ball around. Can the Los Angeles Chargers defense play a similar to game
Yeah.
that we saw against the Miami Dolphins? If they can replicate that game plan that they had against the Dolphins, where they limit the explosive plays in that Miami pass game and just was able to kind of wear them down, I think we can see a dominant Charger performance. Because if you flip it, even like the Chargers are used to not playing with at least one of their alpha receivers on the outside. Keenan Allen missed the majority of the early part of the season. Mike Williams missed the middle. They still have Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer, even though he isn't Mike Williams, he stepped up and he played well in place of Mike Williams. And then they also got some, assistance from DeAndre Carter and then also Gerald Everett. Like Gerald Everett and Joshua Palmer, like those are two guys that Herbert needs to be able to lean on to make some big plays, because you know that Jacksonville defense is going to try to focus on Keenan Allen because, as you alluded to, they've been playing some solid ball over the past month or so. Like the defensive line has come to life. Josh Allen making splash plays, Javon Walker, the number one pick, making splash plays. Even in the secondary,
Yeah.
we see them. Perfect example is when Dak Prescott, he got picked off by Rayshon Jenkins, and he returned it for the touchdown to seal the game in overtime. And so when you see all these playmakers all over the field in Jacksonville's defense, this tells me that this is going to be a close
Mm.
game. So right now, we see Jacksonville as, what is it now? It's plus 1.5. I saw it creep
Who-
up to plus 2. I can't pick a side on this one. I think if both of these offenses come to play, it could possibly push over. And the reason I say is this, and I'm going to hand it over to Jared. What do we know Brandon Staley to be? Uber aggressive, like going for it on fourth downs, instead of kicking a field goal, pressing his luck, trying to get the touchdown. Peterson is the
Mhm.
same way. Like we've seen him make calls like that midway through the season. That's probably one of the reasons they're in the playoff right now, because some of those calls he had.
Yeah.
So both of these coaches are uber aggressive. It could end up going against him, but it could end up having us see a sneaky shootout in this one. And in that case, seeing 47.5, you may push over.
This one's going to be interesting because I looked up a stat. The last 5 times that they played in Jacksonville, Jags are 0-5 against the spread, and the Chargers' scoring margin in those games is an average of plus 16, which is pretty crazy. And if you go by those stats, I know kind of different teams at that point, but still some of the same core pieces. Like it looked like the Chargers might blow them out, but I don't think that's going to be the case with the way that the Jags defense has been playing, especially over the last 5 weeks, Jared.
Yeah, and Tank's point about the over, we didn't talk about the total, but the line did open 46.5 at Westgate, and it pushed through 47, now 47.5. And, we talked 44, 51. That's kind of the range of those key totals. 47 is kind of the other one that is important. So the fact that it moved through 47 to 47.5 says there's a pretty decent appetite for the over in the market, at least at the early stage.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most high variance of all the games, and it's because you have both quarterbacks making their first career playoff start, and both quarterbacks are high upside guys, unlike Skylar Thompson, who not a high upside guy, unlike the Baltimore Ravens quarterback situation. If it's Huntley, if it's Anthony Brown, not a high upside guy making first career playoff start. So I don't expect, whereas you might see some reeling in conservative game plans with those other two guys, I don't think either of these offensive coaches are going to be conservative, despite the fact that both quarterbacks are making their first career playoff start. This game a few weeks ago, week 3, was a stone cold blowout. 38-10,
Yeah.
Jacksonville won the game. Of course, this was the week after Justin Herbert's McRib situation with the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't even know if Herbert was going to play leading up to the game. He
Yeah.
did play, and he did not play well. And obviously, you give him a free pass. He had like 3 fractured ribs, and they had just been fractured the prior week. So it's really hard to look at that game from week 3 and glean anything. In addition to that, Austin Eckler was held to basically nothing on the ground because the Jags knew that, it was probably going to be tough for them to.
And it was the
throw
Sony
ball
Michel
with
show
Herbert
for
injured.
some damn reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And Keenan Allen, Donald Parham, and Corey Linsley didn't even play in the game because of injuries. And Allen obviously is huge, but I would say Corey Linsley at the center position just as important. And we heard Lindsey come out this week and talk about just how much his team has grown. We've seen this Charger team make a really nice push down the stretch. Defensively, they are playing very, very well. And I think they're decent enough against the run. I mean, they're 5th in overall efficiency over the last 6 weeks. They're playing well enough against the run to at least make Trevor Lawrence consider checking out of runs when the looks don't favor that. And I think overall, I do like, I think the steam on the Chargers over the last couple days is pretty significant. And I think if it gets to 3, maybe that's where we see the buyback. But the one thing I really like about both of these quarterbacks is they've been incredibly efficient this year, and they do a good job avoiding sacks, especially Trevor Lawrence. I was looking, Brandon Staley's going to bring the house in this game. That's his MO. He likes to blitz. He likes to be aggressive. Well, Trevor Lawrence against the blitz this year has one of the lowest pressure to sack ratios, meaning he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league at absorbing the pressure and not taking a sack, getting the ball out, whether it's an incomplete pass, whether it's the check down security blanket, making the right read, getting the ball out. And the reason why that's important, when you're making your first playoff start, the worst possible thing you could be in is 2nd and 15 because you just took a sack, or 3rd and 18 because you just took a sack. Herbert does a good job of it too. And again, this kind of speaks to why maybe we've seen some over money and why, there could be some really good offensive designs and schemes in this game. I think both quarterbacks are really game here. And that's why the variance, I think, in this game is super high, because I really don't know which one of them has the edge. They're both making their first playoff start. They both have a ton of weapons on both sides. They both are very skilled at pushing it down the field. One of them is going to play very well. Maybe both of them. I don't know which one.
I know Jared said he had his full notebook filled with games this week. I think you basically touched on it all for that one, Jared. Like, you literally hit every single point that we could talk about. Take you a follow-up.
Nah, like you said, he hit every point. I mean, I
He
think
hit everything.
yeah, he hit everything. I mean, I guess just to wrap it up then is just so what's the lane? What's the lane really? Like what's the conviction play in
Chargers.
this one? Is it
47
I lean
over,
Chargers.
and I think you if you want to tease the Jags between 3 and 7, that would be it. But I don't love that. I would just I would just either bet the over and then or not touch this one.
because I don't have
Yeah.
conviction on who's going to win, but that was
Yeah.
my one note, is that it could be a low scoring game, but if I had to make a lean, it would be to the over. So it's good to hear at least that coming from you as well.
Yeah, you don't have to bet every game, guys. I know you want to, but you don't have to.
We just like talking
Yeah.
about them.
That's
Yeah.
true.
This one, though,
That's true.
this one that's going to be interesting is the Dolphins-Bills game, because this morning when we woke up, that line was the Bills laying 11. Then when we did Let's Bet It, the line was 7.5, and now the line is 13.5. The Bills are laying. So this line has been moving a ton recently. The total kind of stayed stagnant at 43.5 too. A lot of this movement has to do with who's going to be starting under center for the Dolphins. Obviously, they're on the road heading up to Buffalo again. Last time they played, Tua was in that game, and that was one of the most incredible games that I think has been played all season long between the Bills and the Dolphins. But it's 2 AFC rivals going head-to-head. They split their 2 games. Dolphins snuck into postseason, their 7th spot in the AFC. They want to pull off the upset, but who's going to be under center? Wah. Buffalo, 2nd seed in the AFC, one of the favorites to win it all. They've won 7 straight games. And are we going to get Tua? Probably not. I hope not, to be honest, with his 3rd concussion of the season.
Out.
Is it going to be Teddy
Yeah,
Bridgewater? He's dealing with a dislocated finger. Is it going to be Teddy or is it going to be Skylar? And if it's either one of those, do you feel comfortable taking maybe 13.5 points? Because at this point, That's almost two. I mean, that is 2 scores. It's almost 2 full touchdowns, Tank. Would you feel comfortable taking the points with the Dolphins, knowing how hungry the Bills are, and how much expectation is riding on their shoulders at this point?
Yeah, so the news we have now is that Tua has been ruled out, so it won't be Tua, and
Mm-hmm.
that it's trending towards Skylar Thompson being the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, going back up to the Buffalo Bills. And we have a number of games to talk about, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. I would just say this is that, and Jared
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking about it before we started the show, that I mentioned on social media that Kansas City and the Buffalo Bills both have received first round buys this week. And so it ended up working
Retweet.
out perfectly for the Bills because
Retweet.
look at it like no Tua, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill have bum ankles, and it showed in the last game.
Mm-hmm.
The Miami Dolphins offensive line is in shambles. Raheem Mostert is banged up, I believe, and not sure if he's going to be able to play. If you flip it to the defensive
Mm-hmm.
side of the ball, the secondary has been banged up, and they've been giving up plays. And then when you look at the Buffalo Bills, they seem like a team of destiny right now. We just got the news that
Yeah,
DeMar Hamlin, like this dude is at home right now. Like this dude
he's
is
at
He
like
might be at
chilling
the
home.
where
game
we
on
are right
Sunday,
now.
right?
Yeah,
He's gonna
right.
be at the
And
game probably, right?
Yeah, he'll
just
probably be at the
imagine
game
if
on
this
Sunday,
dude is
possibly.
on
Yeah.
the field on Sunday. Just imagine how that
Yeah.
stadium is going to react. And
Yeah.
so it already seems like the Bills are a team of destiny. Like everything is kind of building up in their favor right now. And so they're just going to ride this momentum into this layup of a game against the Miami Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like Jared was mentioning it before the show as well, like you have like this big spread. Like, is this something where you bet it? Like, if it's going to be Skylar Thompson and you're going against
Lay it.
Buffalo with everything seeing the light come into their favor, like, man, hell yeah, just go ahead and lay that and just let it ride.
Yeah.
That's going to be one hell of a momentum wave to ride as you watch the Bills just
Literally.
roll over their division rival in the first round of the NFL playoffs. So I'm all here for it. I'm
Yeah.
all here for it to see it.
I know. This really does feel like the Bills are the team of destiny at this point. And you mentioned so many injuries for the Dolphins. No one's really at 100%. And their defense was basically non existent the last 5 weeks of the season. 5 of the last 6 weeks, they allowed their opposition to score 23 points per game on average. It's 18th in the NFL in terms of yards per game allowed. That's not a recipe for success going into Buffalo, playing against one of the top offenses and possibly the MVP quarterback this season in Josh Allen. So, Josh Allen also loves playing Miami at home, Jared. His average home scoring margin against Miami in his 5 games is plus 16.5. I mean, with that with that logic, I'd lay the points with the Bills right now.
Yeah, and they're not going to play this week, but long term, Micah Hyde, Jamison Crowder both getting activated off IR today.
Yeah.
Especially Micah Hyde, because you flash forward to Chiefs, Bengals, you need that secondary. Obviously, you're not going to have DeMar Hamlin. And listen, DeMar, say what you want about the story itself, which is great. DeMar was playing good ball for the Bills, man. Like, he was one of the leading tacklers on the team. So they need some secondary help if they're going to make it through that Chiefs-Bengals gauntlet run down the stretch. So getting Micah Hyde back would be absolutely huge. If they do. I don't have a whole lot on this game. I mean, not only the quarterback situation for Miami, but Terran Armstead's not 100%. Raheem Mostert broke his finger last week. Those guys had big games the last time these two teams played. Mostert was one of the big reasons why this game was even close. He had over 100 yards rushing. And I don't see how Skylar Thompson sustains any offense here. And if that's the case, I know Josh Allen just 2-4 against the spread in postseason games in his brief career, but I don't really see a whole lot of upside to taking the points. Maybe at 14 is where we start to see a little bit of the buyback on Miami, but I just don't see it. And I think I could see this going a lot like the Patriots-Bills playoff game last year, where 47-17 was the final score.
Josh Allen loves playing against Miami. I mean, I just look, he's thrown 27 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions in 10 career games against Miami. Something about that, bringing that sunshine up to Buffalo does well for him. I'd honestly feel comfortable laying the 13.5. I'm not like urging people to do it, but at the same time, if you look at all the pieces that are missing / not 100% for Miami and the way that Buffalo has been playing right now, and the fact that before that, Josh Allen's average scoring margin against them at home in 5 games. In 5 games is a lot. 16.6. Like, and that's with both teams basically healthy. Like, I'd feel comfortable with Miami beating up the way that they are right now. Let's take it to the afternoon Sunday game at this point. We have the Giants taking on the Vikings, and Jared and I talked about this morning on Let's Bet It. I'm excited to get into this game, obviously. The Vikings laying the 3 points. That total set at 48.5. They played once in the regular season. The Vikings snuck by 27-24. Now the Giants, they're the 6th seed in the NFC. They started the season 7-2, and they've kind of been up and down since then. The Vikings, the 3rd seed in the NFC. They won 5 of their last 7 games, but they are going to want to prove to people that they are not fraudulent. Both teams have the ability to win in close games. We've seen that all season, especially with the Vikings, Tank. They're 11-0 in games decided by 1 possession. The Giants, 8-4-1 in the same scenario. I feel like this game, and if it's anything like the last one we saw, is going to come down to the wire. The Giants' biggest strength has been their rushing attack. The Vikings' strength is their passing game. I don't know how to kind of read this game. I know Jared likes the Vikings here. I kind of like the Giants. I want to see where your head's at, Tank. Who would you lay the points with, or would you take the points with the Giants?
Yeah, so I know Jared's angle here, so I'm gonna just go ahead and speak to the other side and then see if we can somehow find some consensus at the end of this. So if you want to look at it from the Giants' perspective, they had 2 turnovers in that first matchup against the Vikings. We know the final score 27-24. Vikings got the ball with 2 minutes left, kicked like a 61-yard or something like that to win the game.
Wild.
Daniel Jones had 334 passing yards, a touchdown, interception. Saquon Barkley, he had 84 rushing yards, a touchdown. I believe he also had like another 60 or 80 something receiving as well. So I mean, he was pretty balanced in his attack. And then the wide receivers were running. I mean, not running. They were streaking all over the field like Frank the Tank. Like it was crazy. Richard James had himself a game. Hodgins had himself a game. Slayton did what he does. And so if the Giants can clean up the turnovers, get Saquon going a little bit more, get the same or more production out of Daniel Jones and those wide receivers, and the defense is healthier, we could possibly see the Giants roll into Minnesota and do what a lot of people wouldn't be surprised them doing, and that's taking advantage of a Vikings defense that is fraudulent. Like that Vikings secondary and that defense as a whole, is fraudulent. Now, I will say this, Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, like those guys are some dogs. Like they've been kind of flying low key on the radar, like 10.5 sacks for Danielle. Zadarius has 10. Like those, they can hunt off the edge. I think just because Mike Zimmer's gone, it's a slightly different scheme, and because we've been so distracted by how poorly the secondary has played, we've kind of gotten away from how aggressive they can be along their front 4. But that secondary can be taken advantage of. The Giants don't really have an explosive guy that you see on a lot of these other rosters yet, and still Daniel Jones threw for 334 passing yards. And so that to me just shows me that, man, the Vikings are going to have some pressure on them. They've been playing this whole season knowing that people have been doubting them, and they've given people ample reasons to doubt them. And so now that they have this playoff game against a team that they won a turnover battle, and, Kirk Cousins had 290 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. TJ Hawkinson had a blow-up game. Justin Jefferson had a blow-up game. Yet and still, you only beat this team by a field goal. So we can argue that you played damn near perfect ball, and you only won by a field goal against the New York Giants. And so you tell me I'm going to have confidence that the Vikings can pull it off again? I'll hold whatever else I have to say at the end, but that's how I'm going to go ahead and lead it over and then pass it on to my homie Jared.
Oh my gosh, this one's going to be crazy. The one thing that scared me, Jared, and talked me off the ledge with this, is the fact that statistically, it is improbable knowing that a team will finish 11-0 in 1 possession games. I feel like that luck runs out eventually if they can't get defensive stops. And right now, the Vikings allow the 2nd most yards per game at 388.7 and the 4th most points per game at 25.1. Tell me why they can get those stops against an offense that is kind of rolling in the Giants right now.
I can't. Honestly, here's the only thing that I can say. That performance by Daniel Jones and the explosion that he saw with his receivers in that game is the exception, not the rule, to the Giants season. So the Daniel Jones has the fewest big time throws of any quarterback not named Matt Ryan this year. It's not that kind of offense. So the fact that it happened in that game against the Vikings leads me to, and it was a very recent game. I don't know what he's writing right now, but I can't wait to hear about it.
I just don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose it because you said it's the exception, not the rule, but it's the exception because who they were playing. I just didn't want to lose
That's
that.
fair.
But carry on.
That's totally fair. And I have no defense for the Vikings defense this year. It's been awful. It has been awful. I just don't know if Daniel Jones is going to stroll into, it used to be the Metrodome, to, whatever name they've got that stadium.
U.S. Bank Stadium. Yeah, U.S.
Bank Stadium, which is one of the toughest places to play in all of football. And as a first-time playoff quarterback, do exactly what he did, because let's be honest, the only reason that the Giants were in that game is because Daniel Jones played way over his skis. So, yes, the Vikings had one of those great offensive games and they barely won. But again, the Giants needed Daniel Jones to do something he hadn't done all year, which was make a ton of big-time throws, throw for over 300 yards just to keep them in that game. So, and the Vikings, if I recall, had a 2-score lead until very late. So, we'll see what shakes out on the defensive side for Minnesota. But I do think the first foundational piece of this handicap for me is the trend that first-time playoff quarterbacks cover the number just 28.5% of the time against non-first-time playoff quarterbacks. 35-1 against the spread since 2002. And this is a road situation for that first-time playoff quarterback. And the line is just a field goal, which is the slimmest of possible lines before you really get to basically a pick 'em. And last year, all 3 first-year starting quarterbacks got their butts whooped. Kyler Murray got destroyed by the Rams. Mac Jones got destroyed by the Bills. And Jalen Hurts got destroyed by the Bucs. So all three of those games were on the road. It just, I don't know if we're going to see Daniel Jones replicate that performance. The offensive line for the Vikings, I think, is getting a little healthy. Keep an eye on Garrett Bradbury, the center, and the right tackle, Blake Brandel, this week. Brandel got activated from IR. Bradbury's been nursing an injury. Neither of those guys played in the first game 3 weeks ago. So if you want to talk about a massive difference in protection for Kirk Cousins, it's going to be center, right tackle, starter-level guys compared to the replacement levels who both started in the first game for this team. And listen, Kirk Cousins, say what you want about Kirk Cousins, but he's actually handled the blitz okay. And that's going to be something that he will be facing a lot of in this game against Wink Martindale. And I don't know. I really think the vibe for me is if Minnesota plays their best game, I think this game is not close. I really don't. And I think Daniel Jones is going to be in for a long day. But the Vikings haven't played a normal game all year. So do I expect this game to be normal? Probably not. But at 3, they just played 4 weeks ago, and the line was 4.5. So what's really changed in that period of time to now bump it down to the most key number of 3? I don't see a lot that's changed, frankly. So I think at 3, the Vikings, to me, are the probably best value bet on the board this week.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. You hit a tank.
I can speak to one thing that's changed. The Vikings, where you have an opportunity to go into Green Bay and show that you're the most dominant team in the NFC North, and you get your stuff handed to you by the Green Bay Packers. And then in a game where it probably doesn't matter too much against the Chicago Bears, and they have it's Nathan Peterman starting that quarterback.
Yeah,
and
they took care of business.
They took care of business, but it was a little bit of a game, like longer than what you would anticipate too.
They rested a lot of their starters in that game.
They rested. It is the last game of the season. But let's go back to that. Let's go back to the Giants-Vikings game before we move on to the next. I know you said that, the Giants, made some points up at the end of the game. It was a little out of hand. But let's remember this. Like, Daniel Bellinger had a fumble right outside of the Vikings red zone early in the game. So that was missing points when Daniel Jones and the offense was
Yeah,
moving smoothly. Late in the
correct.
game, the Vikings blocked a punt, and then they end up going up 24-16 with 3 minutes left in the game.
Mhm.
So if that punt isn't blocked, I mean, we don't know what happens. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Maybe a totally
Yeah.
different game. And then a couple other things just kind of stand out to me too that I just want to make sure I note. Like, I'm going to anticipate Wink Martindale heating up Kirk Cousins early and often and trying to limit the big splash plays from Kirk Cousins. The one way you can try to do that is try to get them off of their timing because Justin Jefferson, he's a beast when he can run like those dig and those out routes and everything else deep downfield because everything looks the same the way you run his routes. But I saw early in that game, and especially on early downs, he was bringing safety blitzes and things like that. And it was kind of messing Kirk Cousins up a little bit. I would anticipate seeing a little bit more of that. And one other nugget that I need to throw out, which kind of speaks to what Jared's talking about, like Daniel Jones, this could be the opportunity for him to actually become Danny Dimes. Like he
Oh
doesn't have the
boy.
weapons that Jalen Hurts has on the outside, but what he did with those guys that he has right now was pretty impressive. And then I went back and I looked at Jalen Hurts' stats from last year. And what Daniel Jones is doing this year with that complement of weapons that he has is pretty similar to what Jalen Hurts
Yeah.
did last year before he got, AJ Brown, all those guys. Like Jalen Hurts had 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 10 rushing touchdowns. And I think Daniel Jones right now this year has something like 15 passing touchdowns, maybe 5 to something interceptions, like 7 rushing touchdowns. So he really hasn't played bad ball. And he threw some dimes in that game against the Vikings. I don't know if it's because it's the Vikings secondary or not, but he made some plays. Like if he can replicate that and that Giants defense decides to show up, we got ourselves a game, and so that's why I'm pushing the over on this.
Yeah, I kind of like the over, to be honest, too. I mean, the total is the highest in the wild card slate. The Vikings defense isn't good. We've talked about it. The Giants aren't much better. They have the fourth worst DVOA rating. They're allowing 21.8 points per game. The total is gone 6-1 to the over in Minnesota's last 7 games. And I don't think either team is going to have a problem moving the ball against the other's defense, to be
Right.
honest with you, Jared. Would you also lean the over, too?
I don't know. I feel like both. I think especially the Vikings are going to make some adjustments defensively. I don't think Daniel. So hold on. The numbers that I have here, Daniel Jones, it was like his best game of the year, basically. So I don't know. I absolutely could see the defenses being an issue. And listen, the Giants defense isn't exactly, the 85 Bears here. They've had a lot of issues this year too. 29th in overall DVOA, 32nd against the run, but they do get after the passer a little bit. And again, that's, mostly Wink's scheme. I mean, listen, every time the Vikings win, it's close. And every time they lose, it's a blowout. So Vikings, how about this? Tank, this is unbelievable. The Vikings, so they're a negative 3-point differential. They're 13 wins. They're a plus 86. They're 4 losses. They're a minus 89.
Crazy.
I mean, that's
Crazy.
just, I don't, they are
Crazy.
the most statistical variant, outlier team in NFL
Yeah.
history. They have the 9th lowest DVOA of any team to make the playoffs. And this is only going to be the 4th playoff game in the history of the NFL between two teams that had a negative point differential during the regular season. It's basically the fraud bowl. So which team is the lesser of the two frauds, I guess? We will find out on Sunday.
What a way to set that one up. Which team is the lesser of the frauds that moves on to the next round? We'll see on Sunday afternoon. Let's take it to Sunday evening. We have the Ravens taking on the Bengals, 8:15 p.m. Sunday night. The Bengals in this one laying 7.5 this morning. It was 6.5. That total has dropped a couple points from 43.5 to 41.5. The Ravens basically stumbled into postseason. They were 1-3 over the last 4 weeks. They lost to the Bengals to end the regular season. The Bengals got their 8th win in a row. And 10th win in their last 11 games. Will they carry that momentum into the postseason? It's still a question if Lamar Jackson is going to be making his return under center for the Ravens. They are 2-7 straight up in their last 9 games that Lamar Jackson has missed. That's not great. And their offense has struggled when he isn't in. They've averaged 13 points per game during the last 5 weeks that he haven't played. Then you look at the Bengals. They have the 7th best offense in the NFL. They're averaging 26.1 points per game. They have a plus 10.7 scoring margin at home this season, which is 3rd best in the NFL. With that knowledge, Tank, knowing that their scoring margin is 10.7 and they're only laying 7.5, would you feel comfortable doing that without knowing who's under center at this point for the Baltimore Ravens?
These two division rivals playing in the wild card round, I don't know if I want to mess with it, especially right now, not knowing who's going to be on the center for the Baltimore
Yeah.
Ravens. I'll just go ahead and start with that. I think it's going to be a competitive game. The one thing that concerns me about the Bengals is the Alex Kappa injury compounded with losing Leo Collins like a couple of weeks ago. It doesn't look like Kappa's going to be able to play. And so
No.
the one weakness of the Cincinnati Bengals from the very start of the season was the offensive line. And so now you're losing 2 key cogs this late in the season. It may not come back to bite them against the Baltimore Ravens, but I think at some point in the postseason it will. But let's just focus on this game. So if the Ravens don't have Lamar, I really don't think they have a chance to win. I understand they rested some players. Like Mark Andrews had himself a game with Lamar in the first matchup. Had like 2 touchdowns, like almost double-digit catches, 89 yards or something like that. And so he had himself a game. Lamar was just okay, but I think whenever you have Lamar, it just puts so much stress on the defense that it just allows your offense to function a little bit differently. I don't think Tyler Huntley can do that. And obviously, Anthony Brown's not going to be able to do that, even though Anthony Brown threw for 286 passing yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. T. Higgins didn't play in the first matchup. And so everything to me just points to somehow, some way, the Bengals just getting by in this one. But because of the injury concerns on both teams and just the uncertainty that we have right now, I wouldn't be willing to lay anything on this game right now. But I'm pretty confident that somehow, some way, the Cincinnati Bengals move on to the next round, and then I think we'll have a deeper conversation about how that particular matchup ends up looking.
To be honest with you, I kind of like the Bengals laying the points here. They just beat the Ravens by 2 possessions. They're also 7-1 against the spread during their 8-game winning streak. And the Ravens are 2-6 ATS in their last 8 games against the division. They haven't covered the spread in 5 of their last 8 games. And without knowing who's under center, and with the way that the Bengals are hungry, with the way that your not so average Joe Burrow has been playing, I kind of like the Bengals laying the points at home. Jared, how do you feel about this game?
Yeah, they closed as an 11-point favorite on Sunday with Anthony Brown, and Peters was out, Andrews was out. I think one of their offensive linemen also sat. So it was a very mail it in type game. So looking at the line now, and I'm starting to see some 7.5s pop up in the market. So that line's kind of trending back towards no Lamar, likely Huntley, and I think if it goes to Brown, then it probably gets back to the 10 range in that vicinity to what we saw over the weekend. So again, we're kind of half-baked right now with the Lamar Jackson news into the market. And I think at 7.5 up to 8.5, this is the best spot to tease this week. And the teasers in the wild card round and the divisional round especially, because you get a little more volatility, a little less volatility because the teams are all really good, so they play a little more true to their number. But teasers in the playoffs tend to be a pretty decent bet if you find the right spots. And now that we're kind of looking at Buffalo and getting that up to over 10 and Cincinnati 7.5, I would say a Cincinnati -1.5, Buffalo -6 teaser might be my teaser of the week there. And I know we'll do that a little later, but I think I might have just gave it away there. Because I think that's a pretty decent teaser spot, to be honest with you. Now that we're at that number with Buffalo, we can get it to under 7. But I think when you look at Joe Burrow, so first 8 games of the year, sacked 3.5 times per game. They were 4-4. Last 8 games, sacked just 1.5 times per game, and they are 8-0. Strong correlation there. And we don't know, but a lot of those games were played with Collins and Kappa both healthy. You're right, Tank. The entire right side of the offensive line now is out. It might not affect them in this game because the Ravens don't blitz a ton and they're not a high blitz rate team. They're not a high pressure rate team. They kind of get it done with their front four. In fact, their best Pro Football Focus pass rush
Cash
rush
rush.
grade. Oh my God. They're all non-edge rushers. Patrick Queen, Calais Campbell and their secondary have the best, PFF grades for pass rushers this year. So they're not an edge rushing team per se. So I don't know if the Collins injury is going to have as big of an impact in this game as it might the following weeks against Cincinnati and Buffalo, although Buffalo lost Von Miller, so they're a little bit hampered in that regard as well. The only chance the Ravens really have in this game is just to do what they normally do in true Baltimore fashion, just play lights out defensively and figure out a way to steal a couple possessions and keep this game close. But I don't know. I don't have a very strong feeling for Baltimore here. The numbers without Lamar Jackson offensively have been absolutely awful. And Lou Anarumo is one of the best schemers in the NFL. We talked about it the week after they faced the Bucs. They were down 17 points. They went in at halftime. Then they didn't let Tom Brady cross midfield in the third quarter. So I think that's kind of the vibe for me here. Bengals tease it down. You want to lay the 7. That's fair too. But I think the lowest total on the board, teasing that number down through both key numbers, I think value-wise, that's the best angle in this game for Cincinnati.
Yeah, Tank, you have a rebuttal response?
No, I really don't. I mean, honestly, this is a game that I wish both teams were healthy. I mean, just
Yeah.
seeing what Lamar will be able to do against Joe Burrow, and that's the thing. Lamar
Yeah.
really doesn't have the Baltimore Ravens as a whole don't really have the weapons to, I think, keep up with the Cincinnati
No.
Bengals. Yet and still, they won that first game. So if Lamar is able to play, that's a big if. And you have a healthier Mark Andrews. Isaiah likely showed out last game against the
Yeah.
Cincinnati Bengals. So if you have them, you have J.K. Dobbins, who's been looking like a monster the past few weeks. Like, and just imagine like the energy of the whole organization, the fan base just comes alive if you have Lamar back in the lineup. Imagine what that would do to the defense. The defense is saying like, oh, like damn, like we got a chance now.
Yeah.
So if they can get
Yeah.
Lamar back, that changes the complete narrative on this game to go back and revisit everything that we just said. But without Lamar, there's really nothing else to add to this. I think this should be a solid win for the Cincinnati Bengals.
The Ravens were a favorite
Yes.
at home in that last matchup. And I'll echo this before we move on. So 2 of the top 4 receivers for the Ravens this year are tight ends, Andrews and Likely.
Wow.
They don't have a receiver on their roster with more than 500 yards on the year. So they're not an explosive offense. If they fall behind in this game, forget it. But the Ravens closed a 3-point favorite at home with Lamar, and they were an 11-point dog on the road without him. I think if Lamar plays, this line's in the 4-ish range, 4 or 5, but not. It's going to probably steam up past 7 and maybe close to 10.
Yeah, I know. This game's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be a rematch of basically what we saw last week. We'll see if the Ravens can show up or if the Bengals can dominate, move on to the next round. Last but not least, Monday Night Football. Cowboys taking on the Bucs. The Cowboys laying 2.5 points. They were laying 3 points this morning. That total ticked up a half point. Now it's at 45.5. The Cowboys ended the regular season losing to the Commanders 26-6. The Bucs also lost last week to the Falcons to end the regular season. They did rest a lot of their starters, though, after clinching the week before. This is a rematch of what we saw week 1. The Cowboys have looked far from perfect recently. That's not a surprise to anyone, but they have pulled out wins in 12 of their 16 games since losing to the Bucs in week 1. The Bucs are only 7-9 since then. And Tampa has only beaten one team with a winning record at home this season. That is Seattle. They have the 6th worst home scoring margin in the National Football League. I know everyone's saying it's Tom Brady. Don't go against Tom Brady in the postseason. Tom Brady and the Bucs are going to figure it out. The entire season we've been saying that, and they still haven't necessarily figured it out, but they ended up clinching the NFC South with an under 500 record. Tank, would you trust Tom Brady getting 2.5 points at home against a Cowboys team with Dak Prescott that hasn't necessarily been 100% reliable, but they do have an extremely reliable defense? Like, how do you play this game?
LJ, I have trust
Tank.
issues with both of these teams. Major trust issues with both of these teams. Not gonna lie. But first, before we get to this week, let's just revisit last week for a hot second. Like, what in the hell did we see from the Dallas Cowboys against the Washington
No,
Commanders?
I have no clue.
Like,
No clue.
that sh-
No
that
clue.
shit was nasty. I mean, that was disgusting. Like, for real, for real. Like, the punter drops a snap that leads to a touchdown. Like, they were getting killed on over routes. Like,
Yeah,
the Dallas Cowboys offense had 11 three and outs.
that wasn't
11
good.
three and outs. Like, that is just beyond terrible for like any team
Hmm.
that's supposed to be entering the playoffs. They couldn't run the ball. They averaged 2.4 yards per rush. And then if you want to just go ahead and pull a narrative for what Tom Brady and Mike Evans could potentially do, I mean, we know it's the shot play on the outside to scary Terry McLaurin. And we can honestly see that happening over and over again if Tom Brady can connect with Mike Evans the way he did against the Carolina Panthers defense. So if we spin it forward to this week, we have the Dallas Cowboys who play under the most pressure of any NFL team because their owner
Hmm.
is always out in front of the camera 24/7 talking up either his team or specific narratives. And so everybody is always talking Cowboys, which puts the utmost pressure on them. And now they have to face Tom Brady of all quarterbacks who doesn't have a damn thing to lose. The Cowboys have everything to lose going into this matchup, even though they've been playing like
Hmm.
hot doo doo. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers,
Hmm.
like they've been playing so damn terrible. People be like, hey, if they throw up a dud, hey, it's to be expected. But they're playing at home. Mike Evans just exploded for damn near over 200 passing receiving yards and 3 touchdowns a couple games ago. So he finally got his rhythm back with Tom Brady. And the defense is playing a little bit better now. And you get to play against Dak Prescott, where at first, like once we were in that Jacksonville range of the games where they was kind of giving Dak hell, I was like, it's not all on him. Like the last interception that sealed the game, like that
Not
bounced
on
off
him.
Noah Brown's hands. Like
Yeah.
that was a reception that Noah Brown should have made. But like the throws that he was making against the Commanders, like he almost threw a damn pick six before he threw the pick six
Hmm.
the very next play. Like, what are you looking at, dog? So I feel like right now his confidence level is like about as low as it can be the entire season. And now you're playing your largest, biggest game of the season. Like, I really don't know how the Cowboys overcome all the adversity that they're going through. The defense is playing like shit too. And how do you overcome all that in the most important game of the season and get a dub? So if they
Yeah.
do, I believe it creates a whole lot of momentum and it could possibly make the Cowboys one of the more dangerous teams in the playoffs. But the only way you can get to that narrative is that you have to beat the GOAT at home with this offense surging and that defense playing better. Good luck.
Yeah. Do the Cowboys beat the GOAT? I mean, especially coming off of that loss last week. What do we expect from them, Jared?
Yeah, line analysis wise, the early movement off Tampa, 3.5 lasted like 30 seconds. And then
Hmm.
it got to 3, and now we're seeing, let's call it 2.75, with a little bit of juice on the 2.5 there. I mean, Tom says this is the healthiest his team has been all year. The offensive line certainly getting healthier. Ryan Jensen, I think, is going to be back at center this week. And that's very important because the backup center, Ryan
Mhm.
Hainsey, hurt his hamstring on Sunday, and he's questionable.
Hmm.
Donovan Smith didn't play last week. Tristan Wirfs also seems to be healthy. So, you got to believe Tom face value that the Bucs, offensively speaking, are getting pretty healthy. That's very important because Dallas will get after you. Dan Quinn has done a great job this year. They've got the third highest pressure rate. They've got Micah Parsons, who is amongst the NFL leaders. I think he does leads the NFL in pressures, 13.5 sacks. Lawrence Armstrong Fowler Jr., 20.5 sacks. Even Donovan Wilson, the safety, leads the NFL with sacks from the safety position with 5. So even the secondary guys, Tank, you probably would have loved playing for Dan Quinn. Get them safety robbers in the box and just come after the quarterback. They get after you up front. So the Bucs
Hmm.
offensive line is going to need to be good in this game. On the other side, I don't know what Dak's looking at right now. And Dan Orlovsky did a great breakdown of one of the route combinations they put together in that Washington game, where this is the right side of the field, so his strong side. He's a right-handed quarterback, and it was a sluggo route from the slot with CeeDee Lamb, and then Dalton Schultz was running a wheel up the sideline, and he is diagnosing it perfectly. He's looking right at both defenders. And the guy in the slot didn't do a great job on the sluggo, and the wheel route didn't do a great job either. And both guys were open. And he's looking right at it. And he's like, nope, I'm going to come back on this side of the field and throw a late curl route into the slot and almost get it intercepted. So, like, I don't understand what he's diagnosing with his eyes right now. Because as a quarterback, and I didn't play in the NFL, but I still understand basic how to read a defense. If you're looking at a sluggo wheel route combination and you have both corners that are flat-footed, and you got CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, yeah, that's the side of the field I'm throwing to, Dak. And he's just not seeing it right now. 18
You know what that sounds like, Jared?
What's that?
You know what that
Seeing
sounds like
ghosts.
before you know what that sounds
Seeing
like?
ghosts.
You either seeing ghosts or you predetermining where you're going to throw instead
Yeah.
of reading the defense
Yeah.
and putting the ball where it needs to go. And that's a
But that's
dangerous
not
recipe going
at
against
Dak
Tampa Bay
Prescott's
Buccaneers
level,
defense.
at the stage of his career. That can't
Right.
be what's happening. That's something
Absolutely.
I'd expect from Brock Purdy. You know,
Mhm.
I don't expect that from Dak Prescott. And, you know, the turnover-worthy plays, I went back and I watched all 15 of his interceptions this year. They're not pretty. Some of them, though, weren't his fault. But still, turnover-worthy plays, very up. 6th highest turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL. And he's thrown a pick in 7 straight games. So I don't understand what Dak is looking at right now. And
Yeah.
I'm very fascinated to see what Todd Bowles does against him this week. Because if I'm Todd, I am trying to disguise and mix up my coverages as much as possible. And this is the week to get very exotic with your blitz schemes. He's not a very heavy blitz, happy defensive mind. He likes to let his front four do their thing, and he likes to kind of sit back in that zone. But this might be the week that I would be very aggressive and throw the kitchen sink at Dak, because I don't think he has any idea what he's looking at right now. And he's going to make a mistake at some point in this game. Is it going to cost them the game? We'll see. But I don't trust Dak Prescott at all right now, so it is impossible for me to lay 2.5 with Dallas. Now, everybody's going to be on the Bucs this week, and that scares me on the Tampa Bay side for sure. But how can you trust Dak Prescott laying points when clearly he does not trust what his eyes are seeing right now with reading the secondary?
This game is going to be incredibly interesting to see how it plays out. Is it going to be the Cowboys? Are they going to step up to the challenge with the weight of the world on their shoulders? Or is it going to be the GOAT with really no expectations and a Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense that is surging right now, that Tank said? With that, before we move on to some of the futures odds, Tank, would you take the over or under for this game?
Jerry and I were talking before the show, and I think for this one, like, I like the over. I like the over at 45 and a half, because one thing you can point to is this. Against the Carolina Panthers, Sam Darnold was 341 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, interception. DJ Moore had 6 for 117 in the tub. You have to be able to see if, Sam Darnold can do that. Dak should be able to do that with CeeDee Lamb, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, and if that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense continues to trend upward, then we should be able to have some points in this game, because the Dallas Cowboys defense is susceptible for giving up big plays because they like to gamble.
If Byron Leftwich pulls his head out of his ass and throws the ball on early downs, this game's going to fly over. And it's such a simple, like, this isn't rocket science, Byron. He kind of, talked back to the media this week about how everyone's throwing his Bucs offense under the bus. This is not rocket science. When they throw on early downs, they have a 60% success rate on early down throws compared to a 30% success rate on early down rushes. And that was against the Panthers a couple weeks ago. I mean, you have twice as many successful plays throwing it on early downs as you do running it. Like, just throw the ball on first down. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
No, seriously. The one thing that is interesting, though, is the total has gone under in 6 of the last 7 Cowboys-Bucs games. They averaged 34.7 points per game in those matchups, and they combined for only 22 points in week 1. So it would be going against the trend, but I do kind of like it. Another thing to note, the Cowboys 10-1 against the spread in their last 11 games, following a loss. So if they follow that trend, we're going to be seeing the Dallas Cowboys celebrating in Tampa. Okay, before we get into our best bets and Jared's teaser time, let's talk quickly about the futures that we're seeing right now. To win the Super Bowl, the Chiefs are at 3-1, Bills 3.5-1, Niners 4.5-1, Eagles 5-1, Bengals 9-1, and Cowboys 12-1. Tank, if you had to choose one of those teams to win the Super Bowl right now, who would you choose?
It's crazy. Entering week 18, I felt like the Cincinnati Bengals were playing the best ball out of every team in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. But we already talked about the injuries that they have right now. And honestly, it's just really hard for me to get away from the Buffalo Bills right now. Like, it seems like they're a team of destiny. I mean, all the
Mm-hmm.
adversity, like, I felt like they were going through some adversity when they lost those couple games in the middle of the season, to the Vikings and to the Jets. And then you witness what they did on Monday Night Football, and then the way they responded with the opening kickoff in week 18. And I wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
surprised if we see like similar occurrence throughout the playoffs where it just continues to build this momentum. Like the Buffalo Bills seem to be a team of destiny this year. We talked about early in the year how they were just checking off boxes by beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, who beat them the first game of the season last year, and they beat the Chiefs, and they beat the
Yeah.
Titans, who embarrassed them a couple years ago. I just feel like this narrative just continues to build, and especially after DeMar, everything they went through with that. Now he's trending upward. Now this team is trending upward. Like it's a hard bet to go against the Buffalo Bills because I believe that's going to be the story of the NFL once it's all said and done.
Jared, for you, are you still riding the Bengals right now?
I mean, the ticket's in my back pocket. I don't have a choice, right? Um, they're at. I've got decent movement there. It was from 16-9. Let's just leave it at this. I'm not adding to my Bengals position. That's for damn sure.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think at this point in the year, there's not a lot of value in this market. So it's not a market that I'm going to go nuts with. But I will say this.
Mm-hmm.
Based off of what the Chiefs have in front of them, they don't play this week. They're going to be likely a double-digit or 7-point home. If it's the Chargers, it's probably 7. If it's the Jaguars, it's probably 10, 11-ish. It was 14 a couple weeks ago when they played. And that, of
Mm-hmm.
course, is assuming that we don't have an upset in that opening round by the Ravens over the Bengals. If the Bengals win, it'll be Bengals, and I don't think the Ravens are going to beat the Bengals. So I think it's fair to say that we're going to see Bills and Bengals in a very emotional divisional round game next week, and that puts the Chiefs at a very favorable position to just
Mm-hmm.
walk right into the AFC Championship game. And they're basically the same odds right now to win the AFC as Buffalo, plus 155 to plus 175. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I do think value-wise, the Chiefs at plus 155, you're probably getting a decent number there. Because, again, Buffalo has to win 3 games to win the AFC. And one of those games will be on a neutral against perhaps Kansas City. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
the Chiefs only have to win 1 game, and they're going to be at least a touchdown favorite in that game just to get into the AFC Championship game. And then they're probably going to be favored in that game as well. Again, if it's Cincinnati, they'll definitely be favored at home. If it's Buffalo, they'll be pick them, maybe -1 on a neutral. I don't know. We'll see how both teams look when we get to that point. But my point being, I think the Chiefs number is the fairest of all of them because the Bills – I can't make a case for the Bills and the Chiefs to be on the same tier with the Chiefs having to play twice and the Bills having to play 3
Mm-hmm.
times, if that makes
Yeah.
But are
The
the Bills
fairest in
really
all the
playing 3
land.
times?
sense.
They're playing two
Technically,
and a
yes.
half.
Technically,
Two and a
yeah,
half.
like 2.5. It's like 2.5.
Yeah. Seriously though. In the NFC market, Tank, would you take anyone at this point? Or do you think the value's kind of sucked out? The Niners are basically plus 175, Eagles plus 180, Cowboys next up at 5-1, Bucks 11-1. I feel like by the Vikings and the Giants, I don't really see them going too far, so I don't see any value there, to be honest. Knock on wood. Even though Jared might see the Vikings being a threat to this NFC race, we'll see. But Tank, do you take any of these teams at this point to win the NFC?
I mean, my 2 favorites are the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. I could just touch on them
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit because the Eagles, I mean, I feel like that's the most complete offense that you can face in the NFL where they're dangerous in the air because they have Devontae Smith and they have A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert is back and healthy and he's balling. Jalen, Jalen Hurts has just been unbelievable throwing the ball this year.
Yeah.
He's been limiting his turnovers, and he's been a monster on the ground. And so we have to take all that into account when you're a defense facing the Philadelphia Eagles. It's really hard to game plan for them. And then on the flip side of it, they're susceptible to getting the ball run against them, but that front can get after you. secondary. They can turn the ball over. They can cover all the wide receivers in the league. We saw that when they played against the Minnesota Vikings early in the year. So I feel like they're probably the most complete team right now. They were able to secure that bye week. So they're going to be a week healthier. And they're going to have that advantage of playing against the Philadelphia crowd, playing at home throughout the playoffs. So I think that's a hell of an
Yeah.
advantage. And then we've already talked all about the 49ers. I think the one important thing for them is just to continue to protect Brock Purdy while at the same time letting him flourish. If they can continue to do that with that defense playing the way we know they're capable of playing without giving up those splash plays, and then the weapons on the outside doing what they do, I feel like the Niners are a pretty good bet as well.
Hashtag block for Brock. Hashtag Purdy party. I'm making it a thing. Okay, before we get
Did you
into
make
our
those
best
up?
bets, Jared.
Did
What?
you just make
I just made those up.
right now?
Yeah, just right now. Just
That's
right
great.
now.
Freestyling. Okay.
Hashtag creative, guys. Let's go. We love to see it. Before we get into our best bets, Jared, who do you got? Teaser time. Wild card weekend teasers. Who you got for this weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to bet some teasers this weekend. I'm going to bet some personal teasers, some idiotic tease through zero. I'm not going to give them out. That's just my own personal fun bag of tricks this weekend. But
Why
the official
not?
teaser for the show, I mean, listen, I bet a lot of things that I don't tell you guys, and that's just, sorry, I just have to deal with that because I'm allowed to have it's my private betting time, my private reflection time that aren't quote-unquote sharp bets. But I don't care because I like to gamble. But one bet that I'll actually give you that is a pretty decent plus EV bet, I think, at least in the teaser world. And again, the best long teaser of the week, and that's going through both key numbers, is Tampa Bay through 3-7, and then Cincinnati, I think, through 3-7. But I don't love teasing one of the highest total games on the board. So if you want to stick to the rules of the totals mattering a little bit more here, I think Buffalo. Going from 13-6, you get it through 10 and 7. And what did we say? Double-digit underdogs. They've only covered once in 8 times in the wild card round. They've never won outright. It's basically a de facto bye if Skylar Thompson starts. And then I really like this. Like Cincinnati really needs to be at the top of your teaser card this week, going from 7.5 to 1.5, lowest total on the board. To me, that's the best teasable game this week with the Bengals moving through both keys.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Jared has some fun teasers on his own, and then those are the ones that you need to bet. We have a lot of best bets for today, but before we do, let's talk about our friends at Superbook Sports. Let's Bet It is presented by Superbook Sports. Make sure to go to superbook.com or download the app today. And this season, guys, we are all rooting for safeties. That is because Superbook will give you a $50 bonus on each safety scored this season. Just place a $100 pregame bet on any spread or any total, and if there's a safety scored in any game on Sunday, you get a $50 bonus. Make sure to visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. All right. Our best bets. Tank, who you got? Wild card weekend.
I'm going to recommend 2. Like Jared and I was talking before the show, and then actually I got a little bit of conviction on that as we kind of talked through the game. I would take the over in Tampa Bay with the Dallas Cowboys. And one thing stood out. You talk about that Byron Leftwich needs to get his act together and throw on early downs and do things like that. Hey, guess what? Tom Brady's going to be the offensive coordinator in this game. That's how much it means to him. So whatever Tommy Boy wants to do in every damn series of this game, that's what's going to go down. So I have a feeling that they explode on offense. And then I like to take the over on Giants at Minnesota Vikings. We already talked about it a lot. That Vikings defense is fraudulent. I think Daniel Jones will be able to get it done against them, and I have no worries about Minnesota Vikings putting up points. So I like to go over. Give me the over in Dallas at Tampa Bay. Give me the over at Giants at Minnesota.
Points. Who you got, Jared, for your best bets? Oh, other way. Who you got for your
we'll lay the
best
3. I'm excited about this one because I'm sure I'm going to be hurt. I'm sure I'm going to be this is a very regrettable bet at some point. I will regret this, but I have to go where the value is. And I think at 3, Minnesota's a really solid bet. And I think what we saw with these teams a few weeks ago, they played about as good of a game on both ends, at least offensively, as you're going to see.
Yeah.
And I think if there was one defensive team that was going to make adjustments, it would be Minnesota. I don't think the Giants are going to make any defensive adjustments. Honestly, I don't. I don't think Wink Martindale cares. He's just going to do what he does, and they're going to blitz the hell out of Kirk Cousins. And he handled it okay in the last game. Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson combined for 25 catches for 242 yards with 3 touchdowns. Yeah,
Nasty.
I think the Vikings offense is going to be fine in this game. So the question is, can Daniel Jones match serve? And the number that, I've looked at all week, first time playoff starters against non-first time playoff starting quarterbacks have not fared well. And I see more negative variance with Daniel Jones than I do positive. And the last time these two teams played, he had one of his best games of the season. I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that performance. So if Daniel Jones even just slightly underperforms his over 300-yard explosion the last time these two teams played, and Kirk Cousins continues to be steady Eddie and doesn't, as I like to say, and Tank certainly loves, screw the pooch, I think this is a recipe for a Vikings win and cover, and Minnesota starts to erase some of the doubters, because let's be honest, the narrative on the Vikings right now is about as negative as it can possibly be. They're the biggest frauds in the NFL, right? That's common knowledge. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see which team's the bigger fraud come Sunday.
That defense is the biggest frauds in the NFL.
That
I wouldn't say the whole
defense is
team.
the big
That defense.
Make one play
Yeah.
for me, defense. Harrison Smith, step in front of one play and make one. Can you call your boy Harrison Smith this week and tell him to play a little better at that safety spot for me? Get him to diagnose.
Hey,
They
it a
just
little
need to
better.
get a
Hey.
couple
If
stops,
Isaiah
Jared.
Hodgins
Right.
and Darius Slayton back there, you should be able to figure out what's going on with this Giants offense.
Seriously, the Vikings defense is the biggest fraud. They're looking to prove to people that, hey, we can actually make a couple stops on home.
Come on.
Turf, grass.
Vikings
It's
team.
turf, I think, in US Bank
Yeah,
Stadium,
it's
not
tough.
even grass.
It's
Who
tough.
knows?
Make a couple stops on home turf.
Smoking that grass
That's
after the
for-
game if we don't get out over the hump here in this game. Come on, guys. Come on.
It's going to be a fun weekend, postseason getting going. Wild card weekend, 6 red hot games. We broke them all down for you. Until next week. I'm looking forward to it, guys. Until then, Tank Williams, Jared Smith, Lauren Jabara. This is Pickswise Playbook,
Peace.
presented by Superbook Sports. Peace.